Hey everyone, thanks for joining us this week on our expert interview series. And I'm super excited to have this week's guest, Ari. I met him, I think a couple of years ago now at another mastermind event, and I was absolutely blown away with how he created his businesses, a lot of the structure, his mindset, and he gave me a lot of extremely valuable tools. So I've purchased numerous of his books over and been consuming those. They're on the back shelf over here. And I thought it would be awesome to bring him on and talk a little bit more about, how do you really get to the next level in the business, building culture, really diving into your mindset, getting staff aligned and thinking at kind of the next level. Because as practitioners, I know a lot of us are in the position where we kind of get tunnel vision. We can only sort of see what's going on around us right now, and it's easy to get lost into the weeds. So thanks so much for coming on here today, Ari. I'm really excited to be able to dive in. So for those of you who don't know, I'll let Ari kind of do a bit of an intro. He'll probably do it better than me. So yeah, tell us a little bit about you and
Okay,
you came to be.
I'll do my best. It seems like a simple question, but as you know, because you've already been enmeshed in what we do, it's less a direct of an answer than many people's answers would be. But so I'm a co-founding partner of the Zingerman's Community of Businesses. We're here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is not far from you, Brad, I think, on the other side of the border, though, which right now means there's like a giant wall between us, so to speak. But we're about an hour west of Detroit and about 4 hours east of Chicago for people who don't know the geography of Ann Arbor. But I grew up in Chicago. I came up here to go to school at University of Michigan. I studied Russian history. I studied the anarchists, and as Brad knows, I write a lot about the application of anarchism to progressive organizations now in the 21st century. And after graduating with my history degree, if there's anybody listening who also has a history degree, they'll know there isn't really anything one could do with a history degree except go back and get more degrees, which is what I was supposed to do, but I failed. And I really didn't want to move back home, and in order to do that I needed a job, and I had driven a cab part-time while I was in school, which was not all that exhilarating. And one of my roommates was a server at a restaurant that, I don't know, it seemed like he kind of liked his job, so I thought, all right, I'll try that. So I applied for a job as a server. They said they'd call me if some opened. I waited a couple weeks. They hadn't called me. I went back. I reapplied as a busser. Still didn't call me. I waited 2 more weeks. I was running out of money completely. And I went back and I was like, hey, I'll do anything. And they asked me if I want to wash dishes. And I just said, sure. I don't know. I need a job, man. I'll wash dishes. And they had me start that night. And that's how I got going. So I really honestly just lucked out. There's probably a lot of people listening that are like lifelong entrepreneurs. And from the time they were 9, they knew they wanted to have their own business. But I don't fall into that category at all. Everybody in my family were teachers, doctors, lawyers, dentists, etc. So I was the failure of the family for never getting that advanced degree, and I really just stumbled into business. It never even dawned on me as a kid you could go into business. And then also I stumbled into great people. So Paul Saginaw, who's been my partner in all this from the get-go, was the general manager at that restaurant, and we've been working together almost all of the last 43 years now. So I started prepping and line cooking and managing kitchens. So if anybody's in the food world or has been in the food world, at least my background is what we in our industry call back of the house. Paul left about halfway through the 4 years that I stayed and worked for that company, and he opened a little fish market here in town that's still one of the best in the country. And he and I stayed friends, and he had grown up in Detroit, and in Detroit you could get good deli food. In Chicago, where I grew up, you could get it, but you couldn't get it in Ann Arbor. So as is still common in the industry, in our industry, people talk about one day I'm going to open my own place, and a lot of them never do. But anyway, I gave my 2 months notice in the fall of '81. It's not like I hated work. It was just sort of less and less inspiring, I guess. It's what I would now, I've written about what I would now call a good job as opposed to good work. And so I gave 2 months notice, really no idea what was coming next. And Paul, not knowing I had given notice, called me a couple of days later and said there was this great little old building coming open near the fish market, and maybe it was time for us to go look and do that little deli we had chatted here and there about. So somehow 4.5 months later, we opened up. It was March 15th, 1982. And we opened up with 2 employees, me and Paul, 1,300 square feet, and that's it. And fast forwarding last year we got a pandemic for our anniversary. This year, hopefully it's going to be better. But we're now in our 39th year, so we're like an overnight success. And a year ago, middle of March, I would have told you we were on track to do about $70 million in sales in our whole organization, which I'll detail quickly in a sec, with about 700 staff members. Now I'll tell you we're probably due about 55 million with about 550 staff members. So it's kind of on the way up again, which is good. Our organization is a community of businesses. So we started with the deli, but we have, depending how you count, let's say a dozen different businesses, each with its own specialty. So we don't open multiple units of the same thing. We could talk about it, but I'm very drawn to unique things. So we have a bakery, a creamery where we make fresh cheese and gelato. We have coffee roasting, candy, mail order. We ship food all over the US. It's hard to get it to Canada. I know that's a challenge. We have our little, not so little 1830s barn and farmhouse that we renovated to do events, which is not a great business in a pandemic. And we have a food tour business that takes people to Europe and stuff, which is really not a good business to be in during the pandemic. We have a little Korean restaurant called Miss Kim. Zing Train is our training business where we teach all of our approaches to leadership and life and business. And then I'm sitting right now at Zingerman's Roadhouse, which is a sit-down restaurant that's all regional American food and bread. We include North American, so we do stuff like poutine, and we use a great vinegar, organic 2-year-old oak barrel aged vinegar from Quebec, stuff like that. So that was a long answer, but there you go.
Yeah, I think it's super important to give like your background, because you've got an interesting history of like where you started, and I think like that's and important to like learn those lessons along the way. And I guess like when you first started out, you probably weren't thinking you would be where you are today. I mean, especially with the pandemic kind of stuff. But like when you were first starting out, like, what were some of like the key sort of turning points for you as the business started to grow? You started to have success and, needing to hire and that kind of stuff.
Well, when we opened, I didn't think I'd live to be 30 actually at that point. So clearly that was wrong, fortunately. But it's interesting. I mean, I guess people look from the outside and they look at it and they say like, you guys have grown so fast. I'm like, it's not really that fast. Like we generally grow 8, 9, 10% a year. So it's been steady. Part of the design of the organization wasn't the main point, but was to create a diversity, and in nature, the healthiest ecosystems are the most diverse. So like in the pandemic, our mail order has been booming. Our bakehouse is fine, and everybody else is between 0 and 60% of normal sales. So the diversity helps. It doesn't fix the problems, but it helps. So really, we started growing from the first day. I mean, because we were busy, and it's only a matter of days, I'm sure. I don't remember now, 39 years later, but we started to hire more people, and it's just a continual learning process. I mean, there's still so much more to learn and assimilate, and every day we screw stuff up. So it's, we sometimes we know how to do it, but we don't do it well. I mean, it's hard to get it right, in the same way that whatever metaphor you like. I mean, LeBron James misses free throws. I mean, it's easier to know what to do. It's hard to do it in real life. We're not in a lab, right? So this is real people bringing, we all bring our own emotional histories to work, and customers bringing their emotional histories to work, and pandemics and politics and all those other things intervene too. So we just keep trying to get better.
Yeah, totally get it. And I know, you talk about like, building like that great, the great culture of, customer service, and really making your business around that, the customer and the staff and so on. And I think that that's a big thing that a lot of us as practitioners really need to get. And a lot of the time people are focused on it being very transactional and not really understanding that there's more to building like the family and making people want to come back and that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of like similarities that I've learned from you in kind of other industries as well that we can implement into ours. And I know you talk about, building the organizational culture as like the I don't mean, don't quote me and putting me on the spot, but it was like teach or define,
Uh-huh.
live, measure, and reward, right?
Yeah,
So
very good. You're good,
did
Steve.
you get them or did I mess it
Yeah.
up?
No, you got it.
Okay, so
Teach, define, live, measure, reward. Yeah. Well, I actually just wrote about culture this week in the e-news that I do every week, and I know you'll put the link to
yeah,
for
totally.
people to sign up for that. But yeah, culture. I, as you know, I mean, we talked some about beliefs. When I wrote part 4 of the Zingerman's Guide to Good Leading series, it's called The Power of Beliefs in Business. So it's not about religion or politics. It's about what we believe about people, what we believe about ourselves as leaders, what we believe about leadership or business, whatever. And it was my sort of learning from being taught by others. I mean, how much those beliefs are playing out to create big parts of what happens around us. I'm not saying everything is created by our beliefs, but what we believe will have a pretty significant impact on our lives and how other people respond to us. And I started to think about beliefs as the root system of our lives, because although you don't really see them and most people don't even talk about them and many don't even know we have them, there's still 100% correlation between what we believe and the behavior that we enact every minute of every day. Like even just whatever, me being on here with you is a belief that it's good to share information, and belief that you're a good guy, and belief that it's good to be generous with my time in the spirit of supporting others being generous with their time, right? So all of those beliefs are making this podcast possible, and then you bring your own hopefully positive beliefs to the mix as well. So while I was working on that, I started to realize, though, that there's obviously more to the picture, and I started to imagine a whole metaphorical ecosystem of organizations, and that's continued to evolve, and it's now turning into part 5 of the leadership series. But culture, I started to look at as the soil, because anybody, even if you're not in farming, will know quickly that healthier soil increases the odds of the plants in it being healthier. And when one studies, as I do, because we work with food, and now I live with a farmer too, but when one studies sustainable agriculture, regenerative agriculture, it's always the advice: feed the soil, enrich the soil, take care of the soil. The soil is so critical, and it's true in organizations too. So the soil alone's not enough. Like, you still got to have rain, you still got to have sun, etc. But it's a huge piece of it. And I think the culture in the organizations is similar. If you plant you and me in a very unhealthy, negative, dissonant culture, the odds of us doing great work are very low. And we would be no less intelligent, no less capable, but we would underperform. Whereas the same people put into a healthy organization are just much more likely to blossom and do great work. So it's a critical, it's not the only piece, but it's a critical piece of, I believe, our work in shaping an organization.
Yeah, that the thing that you taught when you were mentioning that, I think like that was like a transformational component of creating of just simplicity and massive impact. And I think like that is really like, touching on like what you believe to be true is kind of right no matter what, so to speak, because it's sort of your reality, right? And how you think is going to shape like your actions. So I started applying that to like my staff or my marketing, and I hear people all the time, well, Facebook ads don't work, or I can't grow my business in a pandemic. And it's like, well, that's your belief. So
Right.
Then your actions will always represent that. And then that's going to shape the rest of it, of how other people react with you and so on. So we saw this happen a lot for health practitioners, and it's kind of like the, whether you think you're right or wrong, you're right either way kind of thing. Right. So
yeah, I mean, I used to live with a surgeon years ago. I mean, my belief is that's not really, I mean, obviously it's different work and there's a different skill set and, decades of study and practice for people to become a certified health professional. But in the same way that if we here at the Roadhouse, whatever, if we as the server approach a customer with the belief the customer is going to be really difficult to deal with, they're going to pick up on that negative energy, and it increases the odds that it's going to go poorly. Now, I don't mean the customer wasn't difficult, but if we also approach it with a different set of beliefs. Seems like this gentleman's having a difficult day. I don't know what happened in his life. It could be that his elderly mother is in hospice. It could be that he got bad news at work today. I mean, there's any number of scenarios that allow me to come at it from compassion and empathy, that energy will in turn also transmit and increases the odds that I'm going to be able to give that gentleman great service, and that he's open to getting a great service experience and getting out of the challenges that he's coming from. And I think that's a universal truth. I mean, it's true when I go to the drugstore as a customer. I can make the interaction bad through my presence and the beliefs that underlie it, or I can make it more likely that I'll get treated the way I want to get treated by leading with positive beliefs and positive energy.
Totally. And what are, I guess, like, what are some ways that, like, you know, if you're kind of new or you're wanting to implement this, what are ways you do it yourself as like the business owner? I mean, especially probably like the past year and a bit with you of lockdowns and restrictions and so on. And like, how do you teach it to sort of the staff and getting them to be almost trained in that mindset so that they're more successful?
How do you, you're asking about the beliefs?
Yeah, like the belief cycle.
Well, I mean, it's, I mean, without being flip, we teach them the belief cycle.
Yeah.
So I think in a great way, to your point, I mean, I never even thought about this stuff 6-7 years ago, and I've been writing about business and leadership and teaching it through Zing Train since the mid '90s, right? So, and studying it for 10 years before that. So it's not a common place point of conversation in anywhere really, other than outside of psychology. So just teaching them about the cycle, teaching them about beliefs alone helps people understand what's going on. And many times they can self-correct. I mean, a lot of times people don't even know that they hold these beliefs because they've never thought about it. And if you're surrounded by people, I mean, pick your metaphor. I mean, if you're living in a community where everyone has racist beliefs, it seems normal, in quotes. The history of healthcare is filled with where beliefs turned out to be completely 180 degrees wrong. I mean, the history of how bacteria exist, vitamins, I mean, all this stuff went completely against what people had believed for a long time, right? So beliefs can change. They're not genetic. And if we understand we have them, and we understand that if we're, 40 years old, we have the root system of our beliefs is 40 years of growing down to the ground, it's not going to come out quickly. And I was just doing some coaching with somebody today. I mean, it's just acknowledging that the content of his concerns are legitimate, and I understand why he's frustrated. But if he continues to get mad in the moment, legitimately, from a content standpoint, his negative beliefs about other people that's dragging him and others down. It's not his intent, but it's happening. So the quick answer is just teaching people about it is super helpful. We've been doing it now for 3 or 4 years, so it's very common that in conversations, as people try to unravel difficult situations, the issue of beliefs will be raised.
Yeah, totally. And I guess, like, you as the leader need to obviously spearhead that, because if you're not doing it, then people aren't going to follow suit.
No, totally. And it's not a one-day thing. I mean, this is part of what I wrote about in the essay about culture. I mean, it's 2, 3, 4 years to change the culture in a healthy organization. In an unhealthy one, it could be 10 years. I mean, so, and then another thing that we've been working on, and we'll be rolling out the printed version of it internally, and then we'll have it up on our website to sell to people who are interested too, is we've spent a couple of last 2-3 years creating a statement of beliefs. So we've long had our values or guiding principles. We have 8 of them. We wrote them in 1991, I think. So those are really clear, but I realize I would suggest that values or ethics or guiding principles are also beliefs, but they're ethically based ones, right? So those are the ones that you're not going to ever change. But there's a lot of other beliefs that are commonly agreed upon in an organization, but are not taught. Like, we believe in our visioning process that we use here, right? So, but we don't tell you that when we hire you. You need to pick that up. Now, we're not trying to hide it. It's just common that everybody here believes in it. So if you start in the organization and you're really clued in, you'll figure that out. But it's sort of started to become clear, like, why don't we just tell people? Like, why wait for them to start presenting some alternative path to the future when we already agreed this is how we're going to work? So it's, I don't know what's on there, 40 different beliefs. They're all support our ethics, but they're generally not about ethics. So like one is that asking for help is a sign of strength.
Got it. And the visioning that has to relate to like the foundations that your business are built off of, and like what sort of, binds people together in how the business works. And that's something you do and revisit frequently as well, right? Like it's going to be different 10 years from now and so on, but it's really like the guiding star or the North Star for people to focus on.
Well, we look at the mission as the North Star because it's very important, but it's quite broad. Ours talks about bringing people a great Zingerman's experience. The vision is far more specific and detailed. So we just formally rolled out our 2032 vision. We were about to roll it out last March, but that got a little intruded on. So we formally rolled it out in January. Nothing really changed other than the never-ending, as a writer, the never-ending language edits, but the content really stayed the same. And so that's written, and now that'll hold course unless something drastic happens until we get to whatever 2029, 2030, 31, and then I may not be here, but they'll start on the next one. But we use the visioning process for everything. So project, businesses, new jobs, whatever. It's always, to Stephen Covey's model, start with the end in mind. And we look at it metaphorically. If the mission is the North Star, the vision is the cathedral that we're working to build. So it's basically the blueprint of what you want to create. And in the context of your first question about culture, it really needs to describe the culture you want to create. Part of what I wrote in the e-news piece this week is just the reality. I mean, most organizations respond when culture gets bad.
Yeah, they're not preventative.
But they're not thinking of what they want to create. They're only going, man, I'm really out of shape. I guess I should get in shape. The vision allows you to get out front of it and say, here's where we're going. We know we'll fall short daily, but we're going to keep getting up and moving towards it.
Yeah, I think what you said there is important because a lot of the time, like when people are growing their business or looking at hiring and so on, from what I see, is it's hiring or whatever seems to be very much like almost like a linear approach. And you don't know what you don't know, right? Like you end up having people who aren't thinking about vision or culture. And I experienced it myself where I started to be like, well, these people aren't we're not aligned. We don't think the same way. And then there starts to be incongruency.
Yeah.
And even with that cycle, I believe, well, something's wrong with this person. And then I'm going to treat them slightly differently and so on. So curious to hear your thoughts on like how to, I guess, make sure that that's being upheld, but also implementing it before you start to expand and even start to consider these things.
Well, I wrote a piece in part 4 of the book. The beliefs book is about alignment, because I realized like the reality is that we need to be in alignment, as per your point. And I started talking to both my good friend who's a physical therapist, and he, when I asked him about alignment, he said, "Oh yeah, man, it's all about alignment." He said, the reality of our bodies is that we're always slightly out of alignment, but when the body is healthy, it helps us get back into alignment. We don't even really know what's happening, right? And he said, but when the problem is that when we get out of alignment, then we start to compensate for the pain. And this is when we start to walk funny, or we start to carry our shoulders funny. And what he pointed out, which I mean, I'm sure it's happened to me, like we do it to compensate in the short term, not out of malice, but it sort of slightly eases the pain to lean to one side. But the problem is it creates more problems because we're out of alignment. So getting back into alignment regularly is critical. We're all imperfect. The key is just that we can correct course relatively quickly. And the alignment, to your earlier question, needs to be between the mission, the vision, the values, the systems that we design, and then also our beliefs. Because if you have beliefs that are not aligned with your vision, you'll fail. It's a guarantee.
What do you mean by that exactly?
So in the food business, it's very common in our end of the work that people believe that good food is awesome. I'm totally committed to quality. I want to buy local producers. We want to pay our people a lot of money. We're going to pay livable wage, all inspiring. And then they also have the belief that customers won't pay a lot for products. So what do? They undercharge. When you undercharge, what happens? Two
Profits.
things. You present the image to the customer that what you are charging is the appropriate price, which means then later when you need to raise it, they're mad at you. And number two, you go out of business because you can't pay your bills. So we have a positive belief about the kind of food we want to have and the kind of pay rates we want to provide, livable wage or whatever for our staff, but we don't have the supporting belief that it's appropriate and reasonable for us to charge appropriately for what we're providing, right? Because they like, well, the man down the block, the woman down the block, they're only charging $12 for a burger. How can we charge 18? Because they're using lesser quality product. I mean, it's just, there's no way around it. So that's one. Another one would be like if you're in charge of a department, but you believe you're a lousy leader, you'll self-sabotage. A real life example, when I taught this one time, is a woman who I know well and like a ton, and they have a great business, but I was teaching this stuff and she's like, oh my God, I just realized, like, I always have the belief that you can't really train leaders. They're born and you have to hire the right people. She goes, and now I just realized why we can't get any good managers. So the beliefs are underlie it all, and most of us, as per what I said earlier, don't even know we have them. But the beliefs, if they're out of alignment, won't work.
Yeah,
the reality won't work.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's super helpful because it's, there's so many things that we believe, and it definitely, we can't, it's almost like you can't see it if you're like, not open, or your mind's not as open to it. Right. And
Yep.
that's really transferring to like being a leader.
Yep.
Rather than being like the person who's just running the business. And that's one thing that a lot of people struggle with. Curious to hear your thoughts on that, is becoming the leader and shifting how you're being seen, because a lot of us as practitioners, when we hire people, we don't have those skill sets. So, are there things that you find, from a daily ritual standpoint or skill set that you focus on or suggest that people focus on from, to be a better leader over time?
Well, there's tons of them. I mean, I think that's the work. It's never done. I mean, just like farming's never done. You could be an awesome farmer, but I mean, you're still going to have pest problems, or you still might have a crop that doesn't work out well or whatever. Same, I mean, great basketball teams can lose to the worst team in the league on a given night, right? So I think we're never done. And I think I believe that's one of the things that's helped me, is to realize it is never done. Every minute there's something changing, just like in nature. And that's our work, is to get better, and then to create, as you're alluding, systems and regimens that support that, a belief system that supports the work, and then to learn to work collaboratively with other imperfect people, right? So on a personal level, I wrote a book, part 3, as you know, in the series, is about managing ourselves. And that talks about a lot of the practices that I've learned a lot by screwing up and learning to recover from the screw ups. But I mean, so some of the things I do, journaling, I run every day. I wrote a new pamphlet that just came out a few months ago called Working Through Hard Times, Life and Leadership Learnings from 2020. And just talking about some of the stuff that's helped me and us get through. And one of the simple ones, but it's really meaningful, is just picking up the phone and calling friends that you care about, So whatever works, different people are different. I mean, I'm an introvert, so I like time alone. Other people want time together. But self-awareness around our personal histories, where we got the beliefs from that are getting in our way, which beliefs are helping us, what we need to change, all of that all comes into play.
Yeah, totally love it. And it's I think this stuff's so important because it's not really taught too much. We are so focused on like getting new patients, making more sales, selling plans of care, hiring, and growth, and not necessarily the foundational components. So I know another aspect that you really focus on, that I swipe from you guys, is the customer service aspect, like the 5 steps to effectively handling complaints. So I'd love to touch on that a little bit, because that's been life changing for me. I've literally had situations that were really bad turn into referrals and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, it works. Yeah, I mean, I wrote a book about that too. It's a smaller one called Zingerman's Guide to Giving Great Service. Yeah, I mean, this is just I think back to your earlier question about how we grew. I mean, one of the things that's helped me a lot, there's a essay in part 3 of the book on managing ourselves that's sort of my cover version of a article that Dr. Edgar Schein wrote in the mid-90s, which talks about how, as we progress through stages of organizational development, you and I as leaders need to shift the way we work in order to be managing and leading in a way that's appropriate, or in a style that's appropriate for the stage that we're at, right? And I mean, clearly, when we have 2 employees and you're in there working every day, there's a lot less need for structure. You're standing there all day, you're doing half the work yourself, and nobody gets more than 20 feet from you. When you have 20 employees, it starts to require more systems, more people working. When you have 200 employees, the systems are as critical as who you hire. And so these things are part of the work, is just to continue to learn. And so the 5 steps to handle a complaint, the 3 steps to great service, it really just came from us trying to like back our brains up instead of just being mad at people who are not doing what we want, because it's so, in quotes, obvious, which of course it isn't, but being mad at them for like, what's wrong with them? It's so obvious. Don't treat a customer like this. Is like, well, what is it's basically, we have a hidden agenda at that point, right? We have an expectation that we've not made clear. So the 3 steps and the 5 steps that I mentioned, I mean, it just came from me and Paul, like painfully trying to figure out what it was we were doing, and then translate that into a teachable model that other people could learn from. Because once it's a clear expectation and you can share it, at least you got a shot at getting it to happen.
Yeah, totally. And it's like, it sounds sort of like, as you started to expand and get more people, you're focusing more on the leadership and almost the systems. And like, when you're thinking about designing these systems to solve problems, like, are you constantly kind of looking to break them as well, or try to improve? Like, how do you sort of navigate that as you go through? Like, are you getting feedback from staff? Like, how do you sort of design systems now rather than before when you were growing?
Well, I think it's not that different. I mean, it's still trying to figure them out. It's just, we have other, I mean, there's stuff like lean and continuous improvement systems that are certainly, we use in a lot of our organization that we can be much better at, but we have an organizational change process. So, I mean, it's just really studying systems. There's an essay I wrote in part 1 of the book that is based on a piece I read in Harvard Business Review. I apologize, I forget the 2 authors' names, but basically looking at, again, different situations require different kinds of systems, and understanding that is huge. So if you're in a factory setting, it's awesome to have a standard operating procedure that's followed pretty much every time with really no need for exceptions. But if you apply that kind of systemic approach to customer service, I would suggest, and we've all experienced this as customers, it's going to create a lot of problems, because customer service is not a factory system. Every guest is different. The same guest one day to the next is different. It requires, really, it's more of a craft system. Like, you can create a recipe like we did with the 3 steps to great service, but the content needs to be filled in the moment by the service provider in a way that's true to who they are, and in a way that's appropriately honoring who the guest is. So understanding what a craft system really is, and then being able to work in that way. If you apply a factory system to a craft situation, then that's when you end up with people on, in quotes, the front line, giving a rote response that's completely unhelpful and that alienates the client in a way that's not helpful. I mean, do we take the clients and the patients in order from the waiting room? Absolutely. But you know what? Once a year, there's a situation that's in the best interest of the organization, where, I'm totally making this up, but you have 3 screaming kids in the waiting room. It might be smart to move that person ahead. for the peace of mind of the others, even though it's breaking the rules. So, I mean, this needs to be done ethically and thoughtfully. I'm not saying just we want to break every rule, but service is, it's not a rote system. And when we do that, we run into a lot of trouble and frustration.
Totally. And I think that's a big thing is too many people think about trying, especially in bigger clinics, start to try to systematize everything across the board. And it starts to become what patients hear, like we hear from patients, is it becomes less human related. So then you end up getting a little bit of despondence between patients and so on, because it's like, well, I had a relationship now and that kind of breaks. So one thing, I think is important, what you said to touch on, is to make sure it's congruent and contextual to where the person is.
Yeah. Well, Alfred Korzybski was a semanticist who, among many insightful things, he said, the map is not the territory, which is accurate. And I'm going to suggest in our data-driven modern world, the person is not the statistic. And I don't mean the statistics don't have value, but the person themselves is not really that related to the statistical numbers. So if we treat someone like a statistic, we're going to dehumanize them, and it never works. It's not helpful. It's not healthful. And that's true for me managing a staff member. It's true with a guest. It's true with my significant other. I mean, the fact that, 23% of women in her age, or 89% of women in her age group want this, even if she was one of them yesterday, doesn't mean she is today. And if I just say, well, clearly the data shows you want this, but she doesn't, it's dehumanizing, and it goes south quickly.
Yeah, totally. And I guess I'm curious because you've been through obviously a lot. I know what it was like for us with the clinic and being locked down. And we actually just entered another, at the time of this, it got extended till June now, where things are still locked down and restricted. Thankfully we can still, do therapy and stuff. But, how did you sort of navigate through it? Like, how did you keep yourself and the business and everything aligned? Cause I'm sure it's been difficult. I remember listening to your podcast on the 21 Hats, over a year ago now.
Yeah. It's hard to believe. People thought it'd be over in a month. Well, I mean, this is a lot of, Brad, what I wrote about in the Working Through Hard Times pamphlet was my effort to share some of that. And as I started to do that work, when I wrote it, some of the pieces were written as parts of the e-news over the course of the first 9 months of the pandemic. But when I put it together and wrote the preface for it to frame it was in December. So, it's already hard to believe how much has changed since then, but this is before vaccines had really rolled out. The political situation in the U.S., without getting into who anybody voted for, was not exactly calming or comforting. And people had a lot of uncertainty and anxiety for understandable reasons about where we were going. So I wanted to I'm a history major, and I feel like there's value to looking at where it was in the middle and not just waiting to the end to write about it. And as I was doing the work to put it together, it dawned on me, like, you know what, these are the exact same things in hindsight, essentially, that I did to get through 9/11. It's the same things that we did to get through the economic collapse of whatever it was, 09. It's the same things we've done that through any difficult time. And I realized, I'm writing about the pandemic, but the truth is the things that are in there: journaling, visioning, looking back on where you came from and learning how you succeeded in the past through difficult times, calling friends, building hope. These are timeless tools for all of us to get through. The hope work is huge. I wrote a couple essays in part 4 of the book about hope, which again, I had never given an iota of thought to, but turns out to be an enormous part of what helps people in any part of life to succeed. In the patient care world, if they don't have hope and believe in a positive future, they'll never do the rehab work. And so hope is a huge piece of organizational health. And the ecosystem metaphor, I started to look at it like the sun. Plants will always grow towards the sun, and the people will always lean towards where the hope is. And I didn't do it to build hope, but I don't know what it was, second, third night of the whole chaotic situation. I decided I better send a note to the whole community of businesses staff, just to update them. And then the next day, of course, so much had already changed that I sent another one, and then the next night another one. And then I was like, I'm just going to keep going. And I started to get these, nice notes back from staff saying like, thank you for doing this. It's so hopeful. And I'm like, wasn't really what I was trying to do. I was really just trying to share information, and it was a nice comment, and took it for what it was. And then sometimes when I'd be emailing with friends around the world, I didn't really feel like copying over everything. I mean, repeating everything. So I just copy, and I'm like, here's what I sent to staff yesterday. And I'd send it to them, and they would say like, man, this is so hopeful. It's awesome. And I thought, okay, what's going on? So I realized that I was essentially doing the 6 elements of what I called the Hope Star in the essays in the book. I didn't do them in the order that I write about them, but I was essentially doing them, and in the process raising people's hope levels. And it's a big piece of the work. Like if we're not helping to create a hopeful workplace or a hopeful patient care setting, then people's performance, I mean, it goes down. And there's a ton of data, which is, I'm not the data person, but I've gathered by studying those who have gathered data appropriately through surveying and studying, that it's just clearly correlated: hope levels to health, hope levels to performance in athletics, hope levels to performance in academics, hope levels to your energy in the business, et cetera. So it turned out to be a big piece.
Yeah, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet because I just got the copies of it. But what are some of the things that you have to create that? Like, is it sort of related back to like your vision and the mission statement and that kind of stuff as well?
You're asking about hope?
Yeah, like how you.
Well, I mean, it could be, but hope, I mean, they are hopeful documents in and of themselves because they do these 6 things. But the 6 things that, I mean, I don't know if they're the right 6 things. They're the 6 I came up with from studying a lot of other people's work and then translating that into my own on the ground imperfect experiences. The 6 things are: help people see a better future. Second thing is to help them see how to get there, because if you only see a better future but you don't know how to get there, it turns into magical thinking. Like one day I hope I want to be Michael Jordan. Well, that's not going to happen. The third thing is to help people see how much they matter as human beings. This is back to on the negative side, what you talked about, the dehumanization. Mm-hmm. This is to humanize them. It doesn't matter how good or bad their work is, but they matter as a person. The fourth thing is to help them see how good their work is, so that they start to understand like that when you treat the client in a certain way, this is the impact that it's having. So in our world, it's reminding people like you might have made 600 loaves of bread, and please understand like some of those breads totally made people's day. I know it's hard when we're busy doing all this carry out, but I just want you to understand, like for a lot of the people that we're doing the carry out for, your meal that you prepared for them and giving it to them over the counter is the only human contact they had for the whole day, and how much that really matters. So that's the fourth one. The fifth one is to help them see how the small things matter. So high hope people understand that little actions end up making a big difference. Low hope people buy lottery tickets, and I'm not judging buying lottery tickets, but high hope people tend to not wait for the magic answer because they understand that you're reading, look at Warren Buffett. What does he say? 200 books a year. Like he clearly doesn't need the money. He doesn't need the attention. It's just, this is his regimen. So helping people understand that in our world, like getting the salt right on the mashed potatoes is a hugely important thing, because you can detract from the guest experience. You can lose a lifetime customer, et cetera. And then the sixth one, last but not least, is to help people see they're part of something greater than themselves, because people with low hope feel isolated. So that was quick, but there you go.
No, I love it. I think it's super helpful, and I appreciate.
And there's way more about it in the book.
Yeah, I just got a case of them, so I'm going to be giving this to clients and getting.
Okay, thanks for doing that, man.
No problem. I appreciate you popping on here and sharing your wisdom and experience. I know you're a super busy guy, so I really appreciate you coming on and sharing everything and giving some, actionable content and getting people to think outside of just our traditional ways. So I'll make sure I drop some links below. But if people want to learn more about Zing Train and some of the stuff you're talking about, like how can they find out more?
Well, they can go on zingtrain.com, has all our training seminars. One of the 14 good things about the pandemic is that Zing Train is online now with 2-hour sessions that make it much easier for people to access some of the training. Zing Train also has all the books and pamphlets, as the Zingerman's Press. We're kind of off the grid, so we do I didn't really like the big publishing world that much, so we do all the design and in-house and everything, and then we print them here in town. So we're kind of off of the mainstream purchasing routes. That's actually back to the idea of alignment. It's more aligned with my values, our values. And then my email is ari@zingermans.com. People are more than welcome to email me with questions if they think of something. Please reach out, and then you'll put the e-news link in the show notes so people can access that, and then they can get info, whether they want it or not. They can get it every Wednesday when I send it out. It takes under 3 seconds to delete it if they don't want to read it.
Yeah, well, it's in their best interest too. So it's definitely good. I'll make sure I drop those links below. And thanks so much for coming on and sharing. Any sort of last thoughts before we sign off?
Just, and ultimately, I guess we're all in this together, and the more we help each other across industries, across communities, inside organizations, we're all in it together. I mean, none of us are going to get out of this alone. We need to be able to share information, share support, choose positive beliefs, not negative beliefs. And this is a lot of what I wrote in the pamphlet, which is just treating everybody with dignity. It rarely goes wrong. And that's my commitment to myself, and it's just to try, no matter how much I might disagree with anybody about anything, it's just to really come with compassion and empathy and treat them with dignity throughout, and the belief that's going to go better for everybody.
Awesome. Super powerful. I appreciate you coming on. Thanks again.
Hey, my pleasure, man.